continuing to have the tough conversations, but it's from such a good place because it's coming from a place of, I want to make you better. I want to make the firm better.
Welcome to Spill the Ink, a podcast by Reputation Inc., where we feature experts in growth and brand visibility for law firms and architecture, engineering, and construction firms. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Michelle Calcote King. I'm your host, and I'm the principal and president of Reputation Inc. We are a public relations and thought leadership marketing agency for B2B professional services firms, including many architecture, engineering, and construction firms. To learn more, go to rep-inc, that's inc with a K.com. So, a lot of us think about mentorship as senior staff passing down wisdom to junior employees. And in reality, some of the best learning moments will be entirely blind to org charts. And today, we're going to be talking about finding learning opportunities in unexpected places and how looking beyond titles and departments might just be the key to building stronger, more integrated firms. So, I'm very excited to welcome Reagan Branham to Spill the Ink. Reagan has over 25 years of experience in AEC marketing and journalism. She's the Chief Marketing Officer at HERA Laboratory Planners, and she serves on the board of the Society for Marketing Professional Services, SMPS, St. Louis, and she's the organization's education director. So thank you for joining us, Reagan. Really excited to talk about this.
Thank you for having me.
So I gave that really brief intro, but I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your background, kind of how you got into AEC. I always love hearing about that.
So probably like many people, I did not, this career sort of found me. I didn't find it. I was a journalist for many years. I went to journalism school and always thought that's what I would do. I was a graphic designer for newspapers for many years. And newspapers are not doing well these days. So when I had the opportunity to leave newspapers and go to AEC, it felt like a good fit. A lot of the things I was doing in the newspaper industry, doing graphic design, working under really tremendous deadline pressure, juggling multiple things, writing, editing, being creative, all of that really transferred over to AEC so nicely. So it's been a good fit for me. I have been in marketing for AEC for 13 years now, for the past 8 at HERA, and started as a marketing manager and have, worked my way to chief marketing officer.
That's great. Yeah, so I am a big believer in hiring journalists. We have a team full of former journalists.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yes, they have. Well, I believe they have some really good skill sets, especially, we are a public relations and thought leadership agency. They have skill sets that really apply, and even across marketing that really apply, especially when working with experts, being able to interview, draw out those stories that are kind of hidden in a firm, being able to work multimedia. Journalists today have to, they can't just be a one-trick pony, all that.
Yeah.
So I truly believe that. So before the interview today, you were telling me, you really believe that AEC marketers, and really professionals throughout AEC firms can benefit from expanding the horizons of those they learn from. That sort of that old traditional mentor model. I think we all go to college and we think, oh, we're going to just enter into the field. We're going to have this one person that kind of shows us the ropes. But you're saying, look, you need to kind of expand your thinking beyond that. So tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The sort of traditional definition of mentorship, you think about what's the org chart within my discipline. So if I'm in marketing or business development in an architecture firm, I look above me and who's in that job title that I want to be eventually, and maybe I try to learn from that person. And if I feel like mentoring, I look at the person below me in the org chart and I try to pass on some knowledge to them. And I think that's all really good, that we should be doing that for sure. but I work for my firm, HERA Laboratory Planners, is 40 people with a 2-person marketing department. So if I, and that's really not unusual for AEC, right? Or for other companies. So if I think about mentorship and having those relationships with just the 2 people in marketing and business development,
Right.
I'm really limited. But if you think about bigger picture, if you think about, who else can I learn from? Well, I've got 38 other really, really smart people in my company that I can sort of glom onto and figure out what it is that they're doing. What are they excited about? And that helps me understand, like, what can I learn from them? One
Yeah.
one thing I will share. So HERA, we do laboratory programming and planning and design. It's a really, really technical discipline. It's a specialty consultant. And when I started here, I I felt really intimidated because I didn't know hardly anything about science. Honestly, it just wasn't a passion of mine. I didn't care about it. And so I felt very uncomfortable about, I have to learn this stuff because I have to
Right.
know it. So that's
Right.
been one really important aspect for me, is like, where can I find those people who are going to help me understand what we're doing, which I, of course, have found those people, and it's, made me a better advocate for the firm.
Yeah, that's so important. I talk a lot about that marketing and PR people really have to learn the business that they are marketing or publicizing. They have to know it really well because you're the public face. Even if you're not the spokesperson, you are setting that up. You're that go-between. And so if you don't speak that language and understand those technical concepts, at some level. And so you can't be scared to ask those questions. So tell me how you kind of were able to kind of make those connections. What did you do? How did you find those right people to go out and say, hey, I want to form this relationship or this mentorship with you, or I'd like to learn. What did you do?
Yeah, I think so. In my case, I would say I probably never really had that sort of conversation. It's been really organic, and it's about me just connecting with people. But the first step, probably for myself and for everyone, is to just really understand yourself and what are your strengths and your
Hmm.
weaknesses. Um,
Mm,
because once you understand that, then you can figure out, well, what can I do to make them better? So, of course,
yeah.
there's like a million personality tests, assessments, and things like that out online. A good starting one would be the Myers-Briggs assessment. And,
Mm,
they ask you, oh gosh, so many different things. They're going to ask you, do you connect easily with new people? Are you organized? Do you like to start conversations? Are you impulsive? Do you follow plans? And then, they gather all of this data, and assuming you're being honest, um, they're gonna spit out, like, where do you fall on this scale of all of these different components. um,
yeah.
and so I think doing that is really important. The reality is there's bunches of them out there. I have taken several, and there's some that feel like I understand the language or the words that they're using, so I connect better with those. But
Hmm.
you take a few and you see which ones stick, but you're going to see a pattern about yourself emerging, and it might be things you already know. It might be just sort of confirming what you already know about yourself. But, to me, that's sort of a good first step. The other thing, too, my HERA and even other firms I've worked for, I had to do these personality assessments when I got hired. And I would say, if anyone hasn't looked at those responses, you should ask. Like, you could definitely ask, what do you have on my file from my hire, when I did those
Yeah.
assessments? Because it's good for you to know what your bosses know about you.
Right.
They are, I will say, my one word of caution, they're a snapshot in time. I don't think my assessments that I took 8 years ago when I started at HERA probably would not be exactly who I am today.
Mm,
But
yeah.
we're always evolving. But there's still a good place to for a starting point to think about your own strengths, your own weaknesses.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I hadn't thought about that, about looking at, from I always think in terms of what skill sets don't I have, which I think is important, but I never thought about doing it from, those personality tests, which is a great idea because that's key to, looking at your where you might have gaps and somebody could help you level up in your
Level
work.
up, yeah.
So absolutely, yeah, it's because that's what you're trying to do. So once you've done that kind of assessment, how did you then identify the right person? How do you look for the person that kind of meets that gap that you might have?
Um, I feel like I'm definitely someone I am probably hyper aware of my weaknesses. I know my strengths too. I'm very hyper aware of where I'm weak, and I'm always looking to make myself better. And so
Yeah.
when I see somebody who's just really strong at something that I know I'm not as strong at. I'm just amazed by them. Like, how do they do this thing?
Yeah.
How, like, I can't do, or I should never say I can't do it, but it's just not who I am naturally. It doesn't come naturally to me. How are they
Hmm.
doing it? And that's how, like, so then I glom onto them. Like, I just want to be around them as much as possible and understand how they're doing these things. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm,
Yeah. I love that.
I'm like
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
amoeba or I don't know, what is it that
I love
sucks
that.
onto somebody?
Yeah. Right. Yes. Yes. No, I love that. So, what do you see as some barriers that some people might face when trying to do this at their firms?
I think company culture would have to be, at the top of the list.
Hmm.
I HERA has an amazing culture of, you know, they want us all to collaborate, to all work together. So I've always felt really encouraged to ask questions of people, certainly in the marketing department, but I'm working a lot with the technical staff and I'm working a ton with the principals and I'm working a lot with the other, administrative staff. And and so that's important is I'm reaching out to all these different people. And I've definitely worked at firms that, like, no firm's ever going to say we don't want you to do this. But there are firms that have the culture of encouraging it, or it's already sort of baked in that you do it. And then
Yeah.
there are other firms that it's just not there yet. And I will say, when we're talking about company culture, a big part of I'm a firm believer, no matter how big or how small your firm is, culture, everyone makes up company culture. We're all a part of it. So if I if something is important to me and I want it to be a part of our culture, I can help make it so, right? Like,
Mm. Yeah.
I want to have relationships with people. I want to learn from lots of different people. So I can do it and I can start making it part of who we are as a company. Um,
I love
yeah,
that. You can impact the culture. I love that perspective to not just sort of sit on the outside of a company and talk about its culture, but to feel some ownership toward it and say, "No, I'm part of it and I can
yeah.
impact it." So, yeah. Hmm.
Along those lines, I think another barrier, particularly with AEC and companies that the technical staff is billable and their hours are
Mm.
really accounted for and they have targets that they have to meet and things like that. And I do think another barrier is that idea of I have to remain billable. It's tough for me to take time out and have conversations and just teach you things because I have metrics I need to meet. And you know I do understand that. I think it's again, it really does go back to a culture that if you have a company culture that billability metric is is so, so important that somebody feels like, oh, I don't even have time to, you know, to get to know other people. I don't have an answer for that. I think probably what I would say is if that individual just might not be the right fit for this sort of relationship that you want to have. Um,
Right.
but uh, you know, again, it's definitely it sort of goes back to that company culture. And I will say, one other, as where I'm thinking about this, one other like really great benefit to having a culture that um, loves having these relationships and intermingling and sharing of information up and down the org chart, outside departments, you are creating really great relationships, network, friendships, and
Yeah.
a side benefit to all of this is retention, is employee retention. Because
Yeah.
once you
Absolutely.
feel more connected to people, even out, like certainly within your department, but outside of your department too, all of a sudden you're growing this company together. You're doing things together. And so you want to help each other succeed. You want to help the business succeed. You want to stay and see it succeed.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And as any company owner knows, it's so much more cost efficient to keep an
Yeah.
employee than to find a new one. The value is so much higher to your clients to retain employees. So if a company owner or someone in leadership is listening and they say, okay, I want to encourage my team to build these kind of relationships. Do you have any tips for what leadership leaders can do? Are there any tools or just tips to say, hey, you know, how do you kind of help them along this path?
Oh, I mean, if somebody is asking, then they're already in the right mindset. In my opinion, if they're interested in it, they probably already have a really great culture for it. And again, I'm going to go
Yeah.
back to my own firm because and we're remote. I'm working from home here. We haven't been in the office for 4 years. Um, but we still have this culture of reaching out to each other via Teams now, of course, and all having this really great connections to each other. Um, so it doesn't even have to be in person. It can be virtual. It can absolutely be virtual.
That's right. Yeah. And you can have mentors that aren't within your company. Absolutely. So they don't have to be in the same office. Yeah, it's definitely a timely debate. The can you build those relationships in person? Do you have to be walking the halls, that kind of thing? I do believe you can still build them virtually. Yeah, absolutely being in person does help, but it can still be done in a remote environment. So,
One of my uh, one of my first people at HERA that I had this relationship with, oh gosh, I'm going to tell this story, and it's embarrassing. I don't look very good, but it's a great story. I had been at the firm for maybe a year or so, and was working with this woman who was just an absolute rising star, just really, really good, um, really detail oriented. And so we were the way HERA works, because we are a consulting firm, we typically work under a prime architect. So I'm sending out my qualifications and I'm sending it to that prime architect who's getting it from all of their consultants. And then they'll, put it all together in one package and send it off to the client. So it was all really, straightforward stuff. Give a resume and give a couple project sheets and a list of our similar experience. Nothing. I felt very confident, even just a year, and I felt very confident I could do this. So I did it. Put it all together. I CC'd this woman who I was using her resume, sent it off, checked it off my to-do list, and moved on with my life and went on to the next thing on my to-do list. And uh, I don't know, I'll say 15 minutes later, she emailed me and proceeded to point out everything I had done wrong. Not in a
Oh
nasty,
no.
not mean, not nasty, but her point
Yeah.
was, Reagan, this was totally sloppy. You missed things, you didn't update our project list. And of course, the first thing I did was like,
Yeah.
calm down. This isn't even that big of a deal. Um, and that's of course a terrible reaction, but I'm human, and that was my reaction.
Yeah.
And so then I thought about it, and I'd never said that to her, thank goodness, because that's not
Yeah.
a good reaction.
Not the
No.
right, yeah, best reaction. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
thought about it, and of course, the longer I thought about it, the more I was embarrassed and thought everything she's saying is absolutely right. I did get this stuff wrong.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I called her and I apologized, and I said it's not gonna happen again. I will be better. But the thing that I really thought about it was, it's not just going to get better. Like, I
Mm,
was in a hurry and I made sloppy mistakes. And I think I'm prone to do that, as many of us are. So it's not just going to get better, because going back to one of my weaknesses, that's it. Like, that's one of my weaknesses.
mm,
So I needed to I knew I needed to have a plan for, like, how can I make myself better? And I
mm.
realized that is one of her strengths. And if I can work with her as much as possible, I know she's going to check everything that I do, but it's going to make me, I don't want to get that email ever again that's telling me all the things
Yeah.
I did wrong. That that felt terrible,
Mm,
right? So I
yeah.
have, in the past, 8 years now, have worked with this woman all the time, am constantly learning from her, and uh, I think I have developed new habits from this relationship where I'm less prone to be making these little mistakes. I've learned some of her, like, really great habits.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that story because I think what it says is find someone who will be willing to put themselves out there and tell you something difficult that you might not want to hear,
yeah,
because that a lot of people don't like having tough conversations nowadays. So, and those are where the real value is. So, yeah, if you can find someone who will risk you having bad feelings about them to have a difficult conversation with you so that you do learn, that's really
yeah,
valuable, because she's risking something by doing that. She could have just taken the easy road and not had the conversation
yeah.
with you. So yeah, that find someone who'll give you the direct feedback. To me, that's what great bosses are. Those are, the ones that'll give you the tough stuff you need to know. So,
And
but a good mentor,
And no
yeah.
surprise, she is now a principal, and she's continuing to do that, continuing to have the tough conversations.
Hmm.
But it's from such a good place, because it's coming from a place of, I want to make you better. I want to make the firm better.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. Love that.
it was terrific. And it was really the start of a great relationship with her.
Yeah. It's great, great example. Well, if there's one, final lesson that you'd like to leave our readers or listeners with, what would it be, to build off of this idea? So, if someone's listening, what would you want them to take away?
I would say your firm does not have to have a formal mentoring program to have this happen. In fact, uh, it might be better if it's not formal, because you can have lots and lots of these relationships. I mentioned the woman who's now principal, and I've had that relationship with her for a long time. But I can probably name 4 or 5 other people that I have this really great open dialogue all the time. I'm finding things that they can teach me. And then I'm also thinking about what kind of value can I add to them, and what they're doing every day. So you know, and none of that is because HERA has a mentoring program. It's all because I'm finding people that I can learn from, and that can learn from me.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for highlighting this topic and kind of giving people I think the instigation they need to do this, because I think constant learning is really critical nowadays, especially in marketing. We have a field that is changing rapidly, and you can't stop learning. So it's really really important to constantly learning. So we've been talking to Reagan Branham of HERA Laboratory Planners. So thank you so much for joining
Thank you very
us.
much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Spill the Ink, a podcast by Reputation Inc. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.